are up to Daf Kuf Amar Aleph Kum Lena Blach Gemara, very top of the page. So in the Mishnah it said that if you have a piece of the we talked about the Gid Anosha, but the Mishnah then said the same thing applies to if you have a piece of a meat that's not kosher, a nevela, or you have a piece of dog tome that if it's cooked with other things, if you recognize it, you just pull it out. And if you don't pull out the treif. And if you don't recognize it, then we say that it's bottled b'nois and tam. And the obvious question is that, and we already learned yesterday that it's that l'chayda. Why don't we say that it's what do you call it? Why don't we say that it's bottled b'roiv? Why don't we say that if you don't recognize it? Just say that's bottle b'rayv. When we answered that beria is different and beria is never bottle b'rayv, right? A beria is never bottle b'rayv. This idea of bittul b'rayv is a fascinating idea. That so we said that if you recognize it, you pull it out and then you look for shishim or nois and tam. But if you don't recognize it, then every single gid hanosh is also every single piece of meat is also because you don't know what you're picking up. And we asked, why don't we say bottle b'rayv? And we answered because a beria is different. A beria is different. We did have a machlekes where the gid hanosh is called a beria or not. So this idea of bittul b'rayv is a big machlekes rishonim. If bittul b'rayv means that the iser now becomes mutter, or it means that every piece you pick up, we say it's still a suffix, but there's a case of probability. So every piece you pick up, you say, probability that this is the kosher one. So for example, there were two pieces of kosher, one piece of treif. So what does that mean? You're allowed to eat all of them. So according to some Rishonim, the Isser became heter. So therefore you can eat all three at the same time. Even though you're eating all three, definitely you're eating one of the ones that are Asr, but it doesn't matter because the Isser became heter. That's one way of understanding what the Rashba says, which is brought down in Shulchan. The Rashba says that you can eat all three, but in succession, not at the same time. Then it doesn't look right. But then others learn that the whole thing is merely a suffix. We don't know. So it's only a question of probability. So you have to do one at a time. And they say that maybe, Taisus right here says that maybe it has to be two people. Taisus says maybe, but Poskim then took traces and turned it into a definite. The top trace on the page says maybe it shouldn't be one person eating all three because then it just doesn't look right. So two different people. And others say that in fact that one of them definitely is us, and you have to toss it out, maybe even according to the Tazis Mahatera and so on. It's an interesting debate. So now in the Mishnah it says the same thing applies to.
That is specifically with Yavesh, though, isn't it?
Yeah, Yavesh b'Yavesh, yes. Yeah. Lach b'lach is different because lach b'lach becomes one mixture. Okay. So now the Gemara says, so here we ask the same question. You tell me the same thing. If you recognize it, pull it out, and then the rest, the grave and everything else, bottle b'shishin. If you don't recognize it, every chaticha, every piece of meat there is asa. So ask the Gemara, bottle beruba. Why don't we say the same thing, bottle beruba? It's not a barrier. You're talking about slices of meat. So why don't we say bottle beruba? Now, if you remember, we have a concept behind Morbeya, and we had a number of times in other places. The idea of davar shebeminion, things which are sold by counting it by the number means that it's chashuv. Davar shebeminion afilu be'elef lebottle does not become bottle. And we had an argument between Rabbi Yechon and Shlokish how to understand that. According to Rabbi Yechon, only if it's only sold davar shebeminion. A dozen eggs is the best example. How do you buy eggs? By the dozen, by the number. So that's a davar shebeminion exclusive. What about something that occasionally you sell it by the minion? Most times you would sell it, by the pound, by the weight, and sometimes you sell it by the minion. So here you have machlekes Rabbi Yechon and Shlokish how chashuv it is. So says now a piece of meat. Sometimes maybe you sell it by how many pieces of meat you get, but definitely it's not always sold that way. So the Gemara says, according to Shlokish, who says that anything which from time to time you sell it by the number, it becomes chashuv, and therefore if it gets mixed up, it's not bottle. Okay, you can argue then pieces of meat, slices of fish, maybe they sold by the slice. But according to the view that says that no, only if it's exclusively sold via counting, then pieces of meat are not sold exclusively by counting. What are you going to say then? Answers the Gemara, a concept we have in Shulchan Aruch, we did just micha, shiny chaticha, a piece of meat. A piece of meat is chashiv because of another rule that we have. And that rule is that any piece of meat that is chashiv enough that you would serve it to your guest, then it does not become nullified by being bottled beroiv. It's called the chaticha haruyah liskabed. Tosfos says a fascinating thing. He asks, so how can we find it's by korban chatas, which is exclusively only for kohanim, a piece of korban chatas that was tummy, they got mixed up with a bunch of korban chatois that were toy, and over there we say that that it becomes bottled. But what about chaticha ruilas kabed? Piece of meat can be a chaticha ruilas kabed. So Tosfos says a very interesting thing. Chaticha rulas kabed is that you want to honor somebody, you think that they're a chosh of a person, and you want to give them covet. He says by the kohanim, all kohanim are treated equally. There's no one who is more choshev than the next. There's no one piece, the chaticha rulas kabed, you'll give it to guests, because they all divided everything equally, and they really were an egalitarian club, and everybody's one and the same. So there's no chaticha rulas kabed there. Interesting concept. Anyway, says the Gemara, so why do you need to, in the Mishnah, to tell us this principle like Gidanosha, and then repeat the same principle again when it comes to chaticha of a nevela or dog tameh? Why? It's that the principle is the same. Says the Gemara, we need it. If you only know about gid, I would say, gid, the berry, it's chashuv, and if you don't recognize it, then all the gidim are forbidden because it's a berry, it's a complete being. Abel chaticha, but a piece of meat, a piece of meat is not a barrier. So therefore, maybe it is bottled, even if you don't recognize it. So that tells us the law just by the piece of meat. Because it's suitable to give it to orchim, and we have this new principle, therefore it's not bottled. Therefore, we need both to tell you both principles. There is an argument in the poskim when we say a chaticha rulas kaba doesn't mean this kind of food is you normally give to guests, or that we're talking about this particular food we're discussing right now. Our focus is rulas kaba. Now, what happened? You didn't make it in a good way. You have a beautiful T-bone steak, but you didn't make it properly. You ruined it, or you cut it up the wrong way. So this particular piece is not ruilas kabed, but T-bone steaks generally are. How do we view that? So the general question of Ben Machlek is that. So the Gemara tzricha, we need it. Okay, now we have a concept we're going to talk about. It's called chanan. In the lexicon of the Rabbanim, we call it chanan. Chanan is an abbreviation which is chaticha nasa nevela. A chaticha, in other words, when a piece of meat absorbs, let's say a piece of meat absorbs. Okay, everyone agrees by basar b'challah. So let's go by the challah. A little milk went into a piece of meat, and now that piece of meat did not have shishim to counter or to cancel that little bit of milk. So what happens? That piece of meat becomes treif, basar b'challah. What happens then? That piece of meat falls into a pot of other food. So you need shishim. You need shishim against just the cholov that was absorbed by the basar, or now you need shishim against the entire piece of meat. Do we say that because this piece of meat did not have shishim against the milk, this piece of meat itself became chaticha nas and avela? The entire piece of meat became an avela, and therefore, if it falls into another pot, you need shishim against that, or do we say no, that all you need is shishim against the milk that asks it? When it comes to basar b'cholov, the halacha is not like a Rabbi Bar Chana, the next opinion, everyone agrees that we say chaticha nas level and halacha, and the logic is very simple, like Rabbeinu Ephraim explains. When it comes to meat is kosher, milk is kosher. So what's asur when milk and meat join together? What's the asur? The iser is the mixture. That's the iser. So therefore, if milk goes inside a piece of meat, the entire chaticha becomes asur, because that's the iser basar b'cholov. But if you have a piece of regular meat and a piece of treifa fats falls onto meat, and then the meat absorbs that treifa fats, The many who say Rabbeinu Ephraim, and many others say that there's no chaticha nasan available over here because all you have is kosher meat with some fats inside, a tray of fats inside there. So if that falls into another mixture, you should only require shishim against the tray of fats that was inside the meat. Okay, so that's, and others disagree, and they say that chaticha nas nevel applies to bos v'cholav, Rabbeinu Tam applies to v'cholav, applies to all kinds of iser. And the original meat that absorbed the fats, there's another thing. Before we say the entire meat is usher, it's called efshel l'sachtai. I don't know if it rings any bells by you if you learn for smicha. Efshel l'sachtai means if it's able to squeeze it out. If you're able to squeeze it out, then we say that the meat never became usher because it's possible to squeeze it out. But if you say that efshel l'sachtai, then the entire meat sort of absorbed whatever the treifa thing is. And then when we falls in somewhere else, we say, well, we don't just say it's kosher meat with a little chelev in there. It's the meat is a chaticha nas nevel. So here we're going to have an argument about this between Rabbi Bachana and Rab. Says the Gemara. Dodesh Rabbi Bachana, Rabbi Chodashin, chaticha shel nevela. You have a piece of nevela. Bishel dog tomei. You have a piece of tomadik fish. Eina oisedes does not aser achetit and tam until it gives a taste, beroitiv ubikefa ubechatichas, until it gives a taste in the roitiv, in the gravy, and in the kefa. Kefa is the little bits and pieces of shredded meat and all these little pieces there, and the chatichas, and in the meat. She's talking about it like this: that you have a piece of treifa meat that fell into a pot, and with a bunch of other meat that's similar. So it's min b'minoi. You recognize the treifa meat that was there and you pull it out, right? So there's no question now about the piece of meat. All the pieces of meat that's in this pot is 100% kosher because the treifa piece of meat you remove, you extract it from the thing. And but now the gravy of that treifa meat is inside the pot and it mixes everywhere in there. So therefore we say that everything in the pot combines, and if there's shishim there against that treif, it's mutter. So then he says,
did we decide that min b'mino is bittul b'shishim?
We had a machlekes, and Rabbi Yehuda paskins that min b'mino is never bottled. He learns that from your kippur. It says, "Lokach dama parva dama soya." You take the blood of the bull and of the ox. You take the blood of the goat, and because we still, even there's no question that the blood that comes from the ox is far greater in quantity than the goat, and yet the Torah recognizes that there are two kinds of blood here, which means that min b'minoi is not bottled. That's Rabbi Yehuda's view. The Chachamim say min b'minoi is no different than min b'she'ein minoi, and it's bottled. In fact, min b'min is bottled b'roiv, and we have shishim, and shishim is only midrabanan. And min, there's a fascinating, and min be'ein min, I don't know if you discussed, there's a big machlek. What happens if the nes and tam, at 30, a multiple of 30 extinguished the taste of the treif, but we still have shishim? Is that mahatayra that we need shishim, or is that really only midrabanan? Because mahatayra, once you had the multiple of 30 and it's gone, what is it? Rabbi Yosef Engel has a fascinating chakira. I'm digressing for 1 second, but what you just raised. His chakira goes as follows. We know when it comes to isurim in the Torah, like treif, the isur is on the object. It's called isuri chefza. Common word of Chaim Brisker. It's isuri chefza. The isur is on the object itself. When it comes to Isurim D'Rabbanan, there's a big argument in the Poskim, the Nesivos, and others. The Nesivos hold that if you did an Aveira D'Rabbanan by mistake, you don't have to do tshuva. Because, why? Because he says that an Isur D'Rabbanan is different than an Isur in the Torah. The Isur in the Torah, the food is treif. The food itself is treif. When the Rabbanan said, don't eat bishul akum, for example, the food that was cooked by a goy, the food itself is not treif. You, the Gavra, is not permitted to eat it. So the Rabbanon don't have the power to asa the food itself, they only asa the person. And the other poskim hold that no, the food itself is also, and Tanya Chassidus talks about that the food of even Yisur and Rabbanon come from Gimel Klippus. That means the food itself is no good. So Rabbi Yosef Engel has an interesting chakira. Those who hold that Yisur and Rabbanon is an Isur Gavra. So let's say by min b'mino is bottle b'roiv, and then the Rabbanon say you go till shishim. So if it's aser, you only have 1 and 1. then the chayfetz itself, the object itself, is also. But let's say you have more than 1 and 1. You have 40. You have 40 to 1, which Rabbanan say you still cannot eat because you need bottle b'shishim. So now that it's only also the Rabbanan, does it transfer from being an Isser on the Chetza now becomes an Isser of the Gavra? So the whole Isser changes. In fact, the Rabbanan said the Isser of the Torah finished. There's no Isser of the Torah anymore. We're creating a new Isser, an Isser of the Rabbanan, and therefore it's only an Isser Gavra. Or do we say that the Rabbanan take the Isser of the Torah and they say, no, what? We are going to take it and extend it all the way till Shishim, which means that it's still an Isser Chetza. Anyway, it was just a digression. Sorry, let's continue.
That was good because I now understand it. Before I didn't understand it.
Okay, good. So getting back here. So he said that all you need is a bittul b'shishim. Once you took out the item, is bittul b'shishim. Says the Gemara. So it comes along. Sorry. Okay, Rav Amoide Alei. Rav said he set up his. The Amoide was his loudspeaker, the guy who whatever he said would repeat loud. But he said no. He said that's not doesn't work that way. He said that kivan shenosna tam bechaticha. If this tray for meat, you said the tray for meat was there. It doesn't matter that it was adjoining another piece of tray for meat. In other words, for example, you have a piece of kosher meat. Part of it is sticking above the gravy, above the liquids, and part is inside the liquids, and the tray for meat fell on top of that. And then you took away the tray for meat. So Rabbah says, well, now the tray for meat is gone. All we worried about is any of the juices. So shishim against that quantity of juice, that's enough. Or shishim against the original tray for meat, that's enough. Because it can't be there was more gravy coming out of the original tray for meat than the tray for meat size itself. Comes along Rav and says, no. If the meat was adjoined another piece of meat, right? And let's say the other meat, it's not, we're going to learn that the concept that if you shake the pot straight away, then everything gets shaking around. We're talking about here, you have a kosher piece of meat, half of it sticking above the liquids. On top of that, that's one example. And another example, they were sort of attached. And on top of that, you had the tray for meat. And then you got rid of the tray for meat. Says Rav, that meat that was next to the tray for meat absorbed. Or another example Rashi gives is the only thing that were in this pot was one piece of meat that's kosher and one piece of meat that's treif. At this juncture, there was not shishim against the treif for meat. Now you took the second piece of meat, the derivative, and that fell into another pot. You need now shishim not against the chayla that it absorbed or the trait that it absorbed. You need shishim against the entire meat. Why? Because chaticha nas nevela. When this second piece of meat was there, it didn't have shishim. That entire piece of meat became trait. Chaticha nas nevela. And now the chaticha nevela, it falls into a second pot. That entire you need now shishim against that piece. Not like Rabbi Bachana that says all you need is shishim against the amount of the original iser. So says Rav, kivan shenasa tam bechaticha. Since the original treif gave flavor into one piece. So Rashi gives one example where all you had in the pot was these two pieces, kosher and treif, and there wasn't shishim. Or Rashi gives another example that the piece of the kosher meat was sticking above the liquid and the treif was on top of it. So the only one that received was this kosher piece of meat, and it didn't have a multiple of shishim against the treif. Then chaticha atzvanas unavela, then that entire piece of meat becomes unavailable, becomes treif. And now, what he said is, so now two things Rav says. First of all, you need shishim against the second piece of meat, or if they were both there, you need shishim against the whole lot, number one. And number two is that so now that this second piece of meat is there, all the pieces of meat in this pot become asa because min b'minoi. Rav rules like Rabbi Yehuda that min b'minoi is not bottom. Kol chatichas kulon, they ask all the chatichas b'nei shehein mina because it's min. Because so Rav, and this is a big machlekes Rishonim, because Rav, Shmuel, Abaye, Rav, they all paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that min b'min is not bottle. But so Rashi actually rules this way a couple of times, but there's other places. But the halacha actually is that min b'min is bottle. So what do the Rabbanon do? What do the Rabbanon do with the pasuk that he learns out from? Dama parva, dama soyer. L'chayda he learned from the clear that min b'min is not bottle. So it's a beautiful Ran in the Dorim that explains as follows. The Rabbanan agree in principle that min b'min is not bottle, but they interpret or they define min b'min very differently. A brilliant Ran. The Ran says like this. The Ran says they hold, the Rabbanan hold, that when you have two pieces of meat, one is kosher, one is treif, you say min b'mina is not bottle. It can be 60 times as many, 100 times as many is not bottle. We say that's not called min b'mina. You know why? Because even though in mitzias, in the substance, it's exactly the same, but legally they're not the same. That's treif and that's kosher. That's min b'eina mina. You know what example of min b'mina is? A dover sheyesh matirin. Eggs on Yom Tov, an egg that was laid on Yom Tov got mixed up with 1,000 other eggs. So the Ran says, the Chacham say, this is an example of min b'mina. Why? Because they're all eggs, so the substance is the same, and legally they're almost the same, because tomorrow they're all going to be kosher. It's only today that this egg is noilad, you're not allowed to eat it, and the other ones you are allowed to eat it. So Chacham is saying that's the only case of min b'mina where legally and in Mitzias, the substance, they're the same. So we agree in principle, we just argue on the definition. And according to the Ran, that's actually the explanation why a dover sheyesh le matirin, I fill above the bottle, because it's min b'minay. That's the logic. Not like Rashi and Beya says, if you remember Rashi and Beya, he says over the reason is why rely on the rules of bittul if you can wait till tomorrow and just eat it properly. The Ran
So
says
would
a
they?
whole different thing.
Don't we say that min b'minoi applies when you've got tumendika produce and truma produce? One of them's not. You're not going to be able to metaher the tumendika produce.
They were talking about Orla. The case of min is where Orla got mixed up with non-Orla, but yeah. So again, that's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that min b'minoi is all we look at is a substance. We don't care about the legal side at all. It's the Chachamim who introduced the idea of legal side. They say that's not min b'minoi. It's bottle, except Avashash Matir. Yeah, you're right.
So theoretically, Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yehuda. They just don't agree with his definition of min b'minoi.
That's the Ran's explanation. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue the Gemara. So Rav therefore says, don't listen to Rabbi Barbachon. So the Gemara asks, I don't understand Rav at all. Mechdei Rav Kiman Amrul Shmaik Rabbi Yehuda. Who's the one that said that min b'minah is not bottle? Rabbi Yehuda. So obviously Rav is following Rabbi Yehuda. Min b'minah le bottle. So that's the question. So my area. So why does he have to say that kinosan latam? Why does he have to say that it gave, if it gave a tam, then Rav says there that you pulled out the piece. He says since it gave a tam in the first, he said because piece number one gave a tam in piece number two, so now therefore it's a chaticha nas nevela and all becomes asa. I feel like nas the tam, even if there was no tam in the second piece. The fact is the first piece is an avela, and therefore it asks everything else. Why do you have to introduce the idea of having a second piece there, and then chaticha nas avela, and so on and so forth? The first piece is the min b'minah. The first piece is there, it asks the whole thing. Why do you have to say there was a second piece there? What was the point of that? Why introduce? You said that the first piece, was cooked with another piece, and then the second piece was put into another pot, and we say min b'minah fil the bottle. Even if the first piece did not give any flavor into the second piece, nevertheless, the entire pot is also could be min fil the bottle, right? Because the first piece is the same min as everything else in the pot. Why introduce a second piece? So Abai gives a very simple answer, similar to what we were just saying before in Rabbi Bachana's case. Abai answers. Sorry. My ear, why does he say kinos tam? Even if it didn't give any tam into a second piece, and then that second piece is there as well. Talk about the first piece sitting in the pot. Everything is also good. We're talking about where the first piece was removed. You remove the first piece. If you remove the first piece, there's no min b'mineh. The chiddush here is, but the first piece answered the second piece. And now that second piece is chaticha nevela. It's not just, if you would learn that the second piece is kosher meat with treifa fats that it absorbed, or treifa gravy that it absorbed sitting inside there, then it's not min b'minah. It's not min b'minah because the meat itself is kosher. So therefore, the chiddush is that no chaticha nasa nevela, the entire piece of meat became now treif, and now you have min b'minay. Now you have min b'minay.
What happens if a small piece of meat falls of nevela falls into a pot, and there's another piece there that's a big piece of meat? Do you have to if you've got hanan for the second piece of meat, bittul b'shishim is going to have to be a lot bigger than if you don't take out the first small piece of meat.
You're right. You're right. You're right. You're going to need that, and if both pieces are there, you can need 60 against the two together.
So
you
the
take
fact
one
that
out,
you take the first piece of meat out, you're just making the situation worse.
No, we're talking about here. The way Rashi says in simple cases, you cook the first and second piece of meat on its own. Nothing else was there.
Oh, okay.
And then you pull the first piece of meat out, and you've added a bunch of other kosher meat into the pot, and all you have there now is the second piece of meat. Okay, so that's the logic here. Comes along Rava, Rava says no. Even if the first piece of meat stayed behind, it still wouldn't be min b'min. If all you had was the first piece of meat, and then you have a bunch of other pieces of meat and gravy everywhere, it would not be a case of min b'min. And why not? Something that we learned previously. Rabba says that afilu teima loikotno sokne. I can even tell you a case he did not remove the first piece of meat. Havi min uminoi v'davaracha. Here we have the concept of, we had as Gemara before in Menachos, that the concept of where you have min uminoi, and you also have an eina minoi. So what we do is, so here you have a piece of meat, other pieces of meat, and then you have gravy. If you forget the other pieces of meat, and all you have is the gravy and the tray for meat, the gravy can cancel out the tray for meat if it's 60 times as much. If it's 60 times as much. So, and if you isolate the two, separate the min b'minay from the eina minay min. And let's first go to the eina minay minay and say, well, shishim cancels the isur. And once shishim cancels the isur, there's no longer min b'minay. That's if you only have the original piece. So he says over here, again, I feel tema loy kadma silkei. Nevertheless, having min umina v'davracha. This would be a case where we have min and mina, pieces of meat, and you also have davracha, you have the gravy. The whole min and mina v'davracha, and whenever you have min and mina and davracha, salik es mina kimisha einai. Imagine the min is not there, so all you have is the min the eina mina. You have the original piece of meat, and you have all the gravy around it. The eina mina will come along and will cancel it. So therefore, if you didn't have the second piece of meat, then the first piece of meat would have been canceled by the gravy. But now that you have a second piece of meat, you know how much you need for the eina mina to cancel the mina? You need now double the amount, because both pieces of meat now are chaticha. The first meat is treif. The second meat was chaticha nas nevela. So now you need a multiple of shishim against both of them. And that's why he talked about you had to talk about a second piece of meat. Otherwise, it'd be a normal case of shishim, it'd be bottle of shishim, and it would never be min b'minay, as long if you had enough to be canceled by shishim. Sorry?
Is that assuming that the treifa piece of meat touches the kosher piece of meat?
Again, we're talking about a case here is
the other side of the pot or something.
The two cases of chaticha nas nevela, as far as here is concerned, we'll see kuf a bit more, is either that you cook the chatchila one kosher piece of meat and one treif piece of meat, and then afterwards you put more kosher meat in there. So already the first kosher piece of meat became a chaticha nevela. Or you had a bunch of kosher meat in the pot, but one piece of kosher meat was sticking out from the liquid, and you had a treif of meat sitting on top of that. So the transferring of all of the fats was only into that kosher meat. So that became an nevela. And now we say like this: if we wouldn't have that second piece of meat, then it's a normal case. You need shishim against you need shishim and the gravy and everything else against the original piece of meat. And if you have it, it's kosher. But now it's not good enough anymore. Now you need shishim against both pieces of meat, the original treif and the first piece, which is chanan, chaticha nas nevela.
But what I'm asking is if you can only get chanan if the treifa piece of meat touches the kosher piece of meat, or is it just if it's in the same?
It doesn't have to. Touching is only if there's other piece of meat there as well. So why should one piece of meat be any more treif than anything else? It's only if it's touching. It's called isa dovuk. Right. But in the other case of Rashi, where there are only two pieces of meat in the pot, they don't have to be touching at all.
Right.
You follow?
Yeah.
Okay. Mishnah. Okay, that ends that part of the smicha, and we'll get back to it in a few pages. Says the Mishnah, Noyig b'Torah, getting back to Gidanosh, the Gidanosh is only by a kosher animal, but not by a non-kosher animal. There's no such thing as Gidanosh. It might be treif, tameh. We use the word treif loosely, so using Gemara's word. It might be an animal tameya, non-kosher, but you don't Gidanosh. And Rabbi Yunus says af b'tmeya. He says no, Gidanosh applies also to tameya, a non-kosher animal. When did the Gidanosh Isa start? Before Har Sinai to Bnei Yaakov. And therefore we see clearly that what? What did they eat in those days? A behemoth tamei as well. Again, there's a big machlekes in the poskim, the Mishnah Melech wrote a whole sefer on this, is whether the Eden prior to Matan Torah had a din of Bnei Yisrael or a din of Bnei Noach. So machlekes Rashi and Ramban in the end of Parshas Emor, but and so on. But from the Gemaras we learned recently, it seems they're constantly saying that prior to Har Sinai, they were Bnei Noach. They didn't keep, like that. He definitely says that they were just goyim, and if the goyim, kosher meat meant nothing. Non-kosher meat is the same thing, and they were given the mitzvah of Gidanosha back then. And the Tanakama who argues doesn't argue on that point. He doesn't say, they kept kosher. He says, Omer Lo, Tanakama answered back, really, it was said this mitzvah was only given to Eden Har Sinai. But Moshe Rabbeinu, Rashi says, when he wrote the Torah, he put it sounds from Rashi like Moshe Rabbeinu had a choice where to put it. He put it in Parshas Vayishlach to tell you the story behind it as to why, what's the basis for the Isra of Gid HaNosha. Just a fascinating thing. Rabbi Yaakov Emden was very much against Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. He accused Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, the crazy placey, of being a follower of Shapsitzi because he used to give out kameas, amulets. And Rabbi Yaakov Emden was a real kanoi, a zealot, in the real sense of the word, wrote all kinds of, I think, Zamaritzim. He wrote Sfarim against Rabbi Emden. Rabbi Yaakov Emden had to leave one town after another, had a hard time. Anyway, so one of the arguments that he had was to prove that Rabbi Yaakov Emden was a follower of Shapsitzi. It's a fascinating, just listen to this. He said, it says that there are 365 Avedas in the Torah, Keneged, the 365 days of the year. But we hadn't had more Makkas. It's the 365 days of the year. So he says every day, every Aveda corresponds to a different day of the year. And the Aveda of Gid HaNosha corresponds to Tisha B'Av. Because it says, I came lo yochel Yisrael es Gid HaNosha, es is Rosh Tevis Tisha Av. And he says that the Aveda of Gid HaNosha corresponds to Tisha B'Av. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, as a profession, was a manaker. He took out the fats, and so he took out the Gid HaNosha, took out the shuman of the Gid HaNosha. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden said, Shapsitzi, one of the first things that one of his first edicts was he abolished Tisha B'Av. He said, Mashiach is here. There's no reason to have Tisha B'Av anymore. He abolished the Sar B'Tevis. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden said, you know why Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz took this up as a career? Because he left the Gid HaNosha inside to be Machshel Eden because he believed there was no Tisha B'Av. If you believe there's no Tisha B'Av, then the Avera corresponding to it also gets pulled away, which is the Isra of Gid HaNosha. So he said there's no Isra of Gid HaNosha anymore, and that's why he made sure that every Yid ate Rahman al-Islam, ate Gid HaNosha. That's what he accused Rabbi Yaakov Emden of. Interesting. Gid HaNosha is tied into Tisha B'Av. Anyway, says the Gemara, it seems, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Gid HaNosha applies to non-kosher animals. Why? It's a non-kosher animal. That's an Isra. And Gid HaNosha is another Isra, because the Isra of Gid HaNosha starts later, after the animal is formed, when the animal emerges. So that means Isra al Isra. One Isra.
I don't understand that. It says, first of all, how can it apply to? It says, Al Ken Lo Yochel B'nei Yisrael is a Gid HaNosha, right? So if they can't eat it, then if it's a non-kosher animal, it's no question to be asked. Obviously, they can't. So why discuss that even?
Sorry, I don't understand your question.
It's the Al Ken Lo Yochel B'nei Yisrael is Gid HaNosha, right?
Yeah.
But they're not allowed to eat a non-kosher animal. So why do you have to say, well, you're not allowed to eat you're not allowed to eat the
So you're right. The Chachamim say that Al Ken Lo Yochel B'nei Yisrael Gid HaNosha is talking after Hasinai and is talking to the Eden, only animals that were able to eat, so therefore it only applies to kosher animals. Rabbi Yehuda says the story was written in Parshas Vayishlach when the Eden were not Eden before Matan Torah. They were permitted to eat non-kosher animals, and they ate non-kosher animals, and the Torah says, don't eat Gedanosha starting from now, that's Rabbi Yehuda's version. So now the Gemara thinks that Gid HaNosha, right now the Gemara thinks that Gid HaNosha applies to non-kosher animal because of the concept of Isur Chalal Isur, that one Isur can coincide on top of another Isur. So they ask him, so what asks the question? That means that Yehuda says that non-kosher animals, they also have Gid HaNosha. That means he must hold that one Isur can coincide on top of another. So the Gemara asks, does he hold of that principle? Now the Gemara tomorrow, we're going to learn this. We have this concept machlekes of Isur Chalal Isur. Those who say that it does not, and those say it does, and then even those who say it does not, but there might be exceptions. Either Isur Koil, Isur Meisiv, Isur Koil Umeisiv, Isur Chomer. Just quickly to understand, it's more to do with Gemara as well. Isur Chalal Isur means one Isur falls on another Isur. Isur Koil means that this new Isur adds a whole group of people. So, for example, Isur would be if an animal became an avela. So first it was Gid HaNosha, which means the only part of the animal you couldn't eat was the Gid HaNosha. The rest of the animal you can eat. But then when the animal, instead of being geschachten, became an avela, became a carcass, then the rest of the animal you cannot eat either. That's called an Isur Koil. So the rest of the animal now has an Isur which it didn't have before. Now, as far as the Gid HaNosha is concerned, nothing was added on. You already couldn't eat it. Just because now you'll label it Nevela doesn't change anything. So therefore, as far as Gid HaNosha is concerned, this new Isur didn't add anything. But because the Isur was Koil, it went horizontal and it went wider. So it's Migud the Chal on on these other things, it's Chal also drags along Gid HaNosha. Then you have a concept called Isur Meisif. Isur Meisif is where it's adding another layer. So something, let's say, before now was Asabach, let's say the Gid HaNosha of a Shor HaNiskel. A Gid HaNosha, or a carbon. A Gid HaNosha was also to eat. But now that it became a Shor HaNiskel, then not only aren't you permitted to eat, but also it's Asar Bahana. So now, even in the Gid HaNosha, forget about everything else. Even in the Gid HaNosha, a new Isur was added on, Isur Hana. And since as far as the Gid HaNosha is concerned, this is a new Isur, so then maybe it can be Chal also on the thing. That's called Isur Moisif. And that's, so some opinions say Isur Moisif goes. And according to some, you need Isur Moisif together with Isur Koil, which is in the case of Shor Niskel. Because two things happen here. That not only can't you eat the Gid HaNosha, you can't eat the rest of the animal either. So there's an Isur Koil, and then Isur Moisif, you add a layer of Isur Hana.
Didn't Red Model just time out?
Sorry?
You just timed out. It just jammed.
Can you all hear me? Oh, 1 second. Can you hear me? Hello?
Can hear you.
Yeah.
But for a minute you dropped out before, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda hold the Isur Chalisa, but Tanya, we know there's a concept that a kosher bird is a unique thing. A kosher bird, a normal animal, you touch, you become asa, you carry, you become asa, but a kosher bird, an avelis oif toir, it only comes tummy when you swallow it, but then has a chumrah, that's a kula, but the chumrah is that your clothes have to be washed as well. So that it says here, Rabbi Yehuda says, Yochel, I would have thought that tehei nevelas oif tamei metame begadim basically. I would have thought, well, the same rule would apply a non-kosher bird, that if you swallowed it, that it should become tamei and wash your clothes as well. Talmud Leimer, therefore the pasuk says nevela utreifa lo yochel. It says the pasuk that nevela utreifa you should eat letama ba. You shouldn't eat it because it will make you tamei. And we're talking about an nevela of a bird. And it says that what? That the only reason why you cannot eat this is because it became an avela. which means a kosher bird. A non-kosher bird, even before it became an avela, even v'shechted, you couldn't eat it. So if the pasuk says that an avela utreifel yachal b'tashin, only reason why you cannot eat it because an avela, then you have this particular din of the avela's oif toir. Right? But shaken is something which a non-kosher bird, it's not also because an avela. Why is it also? It's also because it's a non-kosher bird. Now, why is it also because an avela? If you have a non-kosher bird and it died on its own, why aren't you over two avelas? One is a non-kosher bird, and second of all, you didn't shecht it as an avela. Must be because ein isa chalal isa. The iser of nevela, which is a new iser, cannot be chal on the iser of non-kosher, which was already there and existed before. So what do we see from here? That Rabbi Yehuda holds ein isa chalal isa. So the question goes back. So why would the gida nosh of a non-kosher animal be us? Says the Gemara, Mishi sur about the nevela, yotze zeh shein isur about the nevela, el mishur about the tmeid. Iser is non-kosher. So the chayda, why then is it if it ain't isa chalisa, why should the gida nosh of a non-kosher bird be us? The chitema, you'll tell me, because somebody holds. Remember the argument we have whether gidin have a flavor, have a taste, have a flavor, and therefore it can make the yarech, the thigh treif, or gidin is a piece of wood balma, doesn't make any treif. So you're going to tell me ain't begidin benois and tam. Maybe it's a piece of wood. There's no taste, and therefore. And ubetmeya nabi, so therefore, if it's a non-kosher animal, there's no isser of eating non-kosher. You're not eating food; it's wood. So what isser is it? Gidanosha. So nothing to do with isser chalal isser. Maybe the reason why Rabbi Huda says if you ate the gidanosha of a non-kosher animal, it's also as gidanosha because there's no isser of treifit. There's no isser of non-kosher because the piece of wood. And therefore, but to me, that's the lot. That's Pshat the Mishnah. It can't be because the Savar Rabbi Yehuda ain't begidin lechatam. You're going to tell me he holds that gidin don't have a taste. It's a piece of wood. But Tanya, we learned if you ate the gid hanosha of a non-kosher animal, Rabbi Yehuda mechayiv shtayim. You did two avedas. What are two avedas? Gid hanosha, and what's the second aveda? Non-kosher. That means he holds that it's food. So the question goes back: if it's food, how can one iser coincide on another iser? How can the iser avela go on the iser of what do you call it, non-kosher? So the Gemara, I'll give you another answer. Maybe let's follow down this path. Really, because somebody holds yes, begin next time. That didn't have flavor, taste, and therefore when you ate the gid anosh of a non-kosher animal, you're chayiv for eating non-kosher. So how come you're chayiv for gid and one isa cannot fall on top of another isa? Because somebody holds that the noyeg v'shalil, he holds when there's an animal, a non-kosher animal come non-kosher, the moment that it began as a fetus, it was already non-kosher. The fetus of a non-kosher animal is non-kosher. But Rabbi Yehuda holds that the gid hanosha also begins the isa hanosha while the animal's in the mother's womb. So it's bevas achas. When do you say that one isa cannot fall on top of another isa if it happens in sequence, but in progression? But if it happens at the same moment, then they both coincide. They come both isur come at the same time. The isur and the fetus of non-kosher and the isur of gid hanosha happen at the same time. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda says that a gid hanosha is chayiv. Now, obviously, there's a problem with that. If you remember the previous Gemara, it will remind us in a minute. Says the Gemara, maybe because somebody holds noeg b'shalil that by a fetus there's a din of gid hanosha. The isa too, but they don't come together. So the Gemara, impossible. How can Rabbi Yehuda be the one to say that gid hanosha starts by the fetus inside the mother's womb, when if you remember, it was an argument between Rameh and Rabbi Yehuda, a 9-month-old that's alive, found in the mother's womb. Rameh says that it's totally independent and therefore needs its own shchita, and its gid hanosha and its chaylev is forbidden. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's part of the mother, it's just another limb, and you don't need shchita. And the gid hanosha and the chaylev of the fetus is actually mutter to eat. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, when does the Isser of gid hanosha commence? Only after the baby calf emerges. When did the Isser of non-kosher commence? As soon as it was formed in the mother's womb. It's not bavas achas. So how does gid hanosha fall on that? So the but now we learn noig b'shalil. Rameir holds that in a fetus you have the din of chelut and gid hanosha. Rabbi Yehuda ain't noig b'shalil and chelui mutter. So the Gemara says no. When does Rabbi Yehuda say that the Isra of Gid Hanosha does not happen in the fetus? It's only by a kosher animal, because the Torah says by a kosher animal, everything inside the animal is kosher, including the Gid, including the Chalif. But by a non-kosher animal, where we don't have that heter, then the Gid Hanosha started as soon as the fetus. So it's bevas achas, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda holds that Gid Hanosha applies to a non-kosher animal. So the Gemara, Hanimi the Gabatel by kosher animal, the Rachman Amatel says cold, the behemoth. He says about everything that's inside the animal you can eat. Okay, so everything inside the animal you can eat, and that's why it's permitted. The what do you call it? The behemoth you can eat it, so that's the Gid Hanosha, the Chayil, all that can be eaten. But Abel, the Tmei, a non-kosher animal, since you don't have that pasuk, noyik, there is Gid Hanosha in the fetus. The Gemara is still not satisfied because they don't happen simultaneously. Again, a Gemara that we learned before. We learned before that the concept of oil. Oil is if you have a corpse lying inside a room, then the entire room, the roof passes the tumor throughout the room, and the kohen cannot walk into any part of the room. So it says there that a nazir who becomes tameh has to start all over again, and only tumor of a mace. Any other tumor touching a shed or anything else, they don't have to start again. They don't have to recalibrate. Only the tumor of a mace, and it says there the tumor of a mace or a kazayas of a mace. And we ask the question: well, if the kazayas of a mace generates this tumor of oil, then of course a mace does. And we answer, no, we're talking about a mace where it wasn't fully formed. What do you mean? We're talking about a fetus where the external body was fully formed, but internally, the sinews, the veins, the arteries, it hasn't yet been fully formed yet. They weren't there yet. And the nerves. So what do we see from that? That the fetus it became formed prior to the Gid Hanosha forming. So they're not happening simultaneously. So the question goes back: how can there be Gid Hanosha by non-kosher animal according to Rabbi Yehuda? Ain't isa chalisa. Again, inside. Umi matzam haki said tabai, but that came simultaneously. But now we look at the Mishnah. Aleilu tumas nozim megaleach, and the following tumas and nozim has to start recalibrate al hameis val kazayis when the mace. If he touched the corpse, or he touched a kazayis of a corpse. The kashlo may ask a question al kazayis when a mace megaleach al hameis kula koshkin. If on a kazayis of a mace he has to start all over again. Surely if he touches a mace, a complete mace. We're talking about a fetus in a miscarriage. Shalom is kashu a vada begidim, where the nerves and the veins and everything else haven't yet fully formed, but the fetus is there. So it's tamei, but there's no Gid Hanosha. Alma isa tumah kadim. So we see the isa tumah happened before. So the Gemara answers. So we're back to the question. Ain't isa chal iser. So now the Gemara is going to have to say that this iser is an exception. This iser will be called an iser moisif.
Could I just question this case, because this case can't really apply because if there's no gid, because it's too premature in its formation, then there's no question about isur chalal isur, because there's no gid hanosha to chal.
Exactly.
So there's no question.
Exactly. So when did this fetus become tam? If you would eat this fetus right now, you'd be over and aware of eating non-kosher, right? Okay. When will you be over Gid Hanosha? Only a month or 2 months later, when the animal formed it.
Never.
No. If the animal didn't die, if this fetus didn't die, just developed fully, where you'll be then over Gid Hanosha. The question is how. So the Isser of Gid Hanosha can only take place once the Gid Hanosha formed. But the Isser of Tumah for this not kosher animal started as soon as it was a fetus. So why? Which Isser came first?
Why is it tummy when it's in its mother's when it's there?
A non-kosher animal is
non-kosher animal. Non-kosher animals always
using the word loosely here. Tamei means non-kosher and nevela.
Sorry, I thought tamei means it's a born fetus that's tamei. That's
no, non-kosher animal. Yeah. Anyway, so the question goes back. So the Gemara answers, we're going to have to use one of the exceptions where Isser is Chalal Isser. And only according to Rabbi Yehuda, he holds that the Gid Hanosha is Chal because it's an Isser Moisif. So the Gemara says here, Gemara says, Avagav the Isser Tume Kodim, Osi Isser Gid Chalala. The answer is yes, the Isser Gid will be Chal. You know why? Because the Isser applies to Bnei Noach. And because it applies to Bnei Noach, it's called an Isser Chomer. It's stricter. How many Avedas do we have that apply to Goyim as well? and therefore we'll put it under the category of Iser Moisif. And once it's Chal on the Goyim, it's Chal also, for the Goyim, it's Chal. And that's a Chumrah, right? It's that this is one of the Vedas that go by Goyim. They can prove it to you. He says, it starts with and at that time they were allowed to permitted to eat behemoth tmeya. So we see that this aveda was given to Bnei Noach. So that's an iser moisif. He doesn't call it iser koil because as far as Yidden are concerned, nobody else was added on. So this is more iser moisif or iser chumrah, and therefore it's chalal iser. So Gufa, let's quickly understand what Rav Shimon said before. Rabbi Yehuda says if you ate the gid nosher of a non-kosher animal, you chayiv too, but Rav Shimon says you chayiv for nothing. And we need to understand why you chayiv for nothing. You should be chayiv either gid nosher or a non-kosher animal. You tell me you ate the gid nosher of a non-kosher animal, you don't get any aveda. How can that be? Says the Gemara Gufa that analyzes how you gid nosher should be able to make. Rabbi Yehuda chayiv time, you chayiv too because you ate gid nosher and non-kosher. Rav Shimon pointed. Now, I'm going to ask a question. Rav Shimon, I don't understand manushes. You'll definitely be over one aveda, either gid nosher or non-kosher. Take like this, Manashach. If he holds that Isa Chalisa, then you do two Avedas, like Rabbi Yehuda. Then the Chayiv Namashim Gid. And he ate Isa Chalisa. If he holds that no, even in this case, Isa is not Chalisa, then, or maybe it doesn't apply to Bnei Noach, so no Isa Chalisa, then at least Chayiv Shatuma, he ate non-kosher. So what are you going to tell me? That Rabbi Shimon holds there's no Isa Chalisa, non-kosher, there isn't either. You know why? Because it's a piece of wood. Ain't begin b'nois tam. Maybe that's why. The ain't begin b'nois tam. Then and if you're going to tell me that gidden have no tam, so then there's no treif. If there's no treif, then you do have the iser of gidden nosher. There's no question of iser halal iser. There's no iser of treif of non-kosher. If there's no iser of non-kosher, then the iser of gidden nosher should apply. The ain't begin b'nois tam. L'chaim should gid. Omar Rava, and that's the halacha. Ain't begin b'nois tam. Omar Rava says Rava. L'olam consumption holds ain't begin b'nois tam. There's no tam. So therefore you're not chayiv for eating non-kosher. So why aren't you chayiv at least for gid hanosher? Because Rav Shimon holds that gid hanosher only applies to kosher animals, not to non-kosher animals. It has no flavor, it has no taste. It's not kosher. The Torah made a chiddush, you shouldn't eat it, only by kosher animals. The shiny hospital, al kain lo yoch when says gid hanosher mi shegida aser upsare mutter. I don't want you to eat the gid hanosher of the animal, as if to say the rest of the animal you can eat, but don't eat the gid hanosher. So obviously we're talking about a kosher animal. Yotzazu, this is an exception. Shegida aser upsare aser. A non-kosher animal, besides the gid being aser, the meat is also aser, and therefore it's different. Okay, that's the stop over here. Have a shur tov. Good luck to everybody.